Good morning or afternoon, players, gamers, and critters. I am Master Mimic, and welcome back to Roaring D20s, my little show where I sit here and talk about all things D&D related, even if it's kind of vague how they are related. I'll get to that eventually. Today's subject, I thought we'd talk about a little thing that I've been just absolutely fascinated with, a subgenre of literature and fiction in general that has just had me smitten ever since high school. This being alternate history. For the unaffiliated, alternate history is essentially you look into the past, be it our own or some fictional universe, and wonder what if things had gone differently. So, like, some popular ones, for example, what if the Axis powers won World War II? What if the Confederacy won the Civil War? These are a couple of low-hanging fruit that have been pretty prominent within the genre. And when I first stumbled upon alternate history, it was actually kind of like I'm a little embarrassed to say, but it was actually when I saw a trailer for a video game called Turning Point Fall of Liberty. It came out way back when on the original Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, I want to say. The game was terrible. Having played it myself, I literally couldn't get past the first level because of a game-breaking bug. It was it was an atrocious game. Again, I am kind of ashamed to say this was my first foray into alternate history. But the background to it, the backstory, was obviously where a lot of the game's budget went. Seriously, they probably paid some guy to just write up a quick story on alternate history and went, oh crap, this is actually really, really good, and we don't have a good game to go behind it. Oh crap. Basically, the scenario of Turning Point is while visiting New York, Winston Churchill is hit by a taxi. Now, in our history, he survived, but was basically forced to walk with a cane for the rest of his life. In this universe, though, he dies. What this essentially does is it leaves Britain without effective leadership, and it describes, I think it was Neville Chamberlain, who was prime minister in this timeline, essentially just folds to the Nazis during World War II. So at that point, the Third Reich spreads across Europe unhindered. It's described that the Russians just get stomped somehow. The Japanese take complete control of the Pacific, and even Benito Mussolini is able to successfully invade Africa and start his new Roman Empire. It's basically like the worst case scenario of World War II. I mean, again, like I said, this is kind of low hanging fruit because this is a subject matter that a lot of alternate historians go to if they want to just make something easy to write. For example, for those. I mean, when I just said that scenario, a lot of people probably thought about Man in the High Castle, both the book and the show, and that's actually by far one of the best pieces of it to come from that scenario, in my opinion. Even though, if if you're a World War II buff like me, you would know there is virtually no way of Germany and Japan winning, at least to the extent of these scenarios. But anyway, I'm getting off subject. So this alternate timeline basically leads to Germany and Japan invading the United States in the 1950s. I want to say the late 1950s. Part of Operation Humpback Whale, which I thought was kind of funny. You know, kind of a play on Operation Sea Lion, the planned German invasion of Britain. Excuse me. And so at that point, the game is all about you playing a construction worker who picks up a gun and just goes to town fighting Germans. And like I said, the game itself is terrible. Like, it's god awful, one of the worst games I've ever played. But the scenario was what I found intriguing, and the trailer alone got my attention. I mean, when you see the Nazi flag being flown by the Statue of Liberty, that's definitely gonna be something that will catch your attention. So that was my first, foray into alternate history. So obviously, what I wanted to do after that is, well, is there more? And boy, was there more. I just remember typing into Wikipedia and just alternate history and just getting this long list of just not just video games, but movies, literature. I mean, essays dating back to like way in the past, and I'm just like slack-jawed going, my god, this has all been here? Holy crap. Where have I been? And from there, I just basically threw myself into it. It's basically become one of my key interests. A few of my favorites. The thing about me in alternate history is, obviously, I'm not going to get hung up on a lot of things. Like, I know there are people out there who will remember a series called The Domination of Draka, or Domination of the Draka. I'm not going to get into that because that is a huge, that's a huge franchise right there. But essentially, that was one of those scenarios that people found so bafflingly fictional. Like, there is no way that could ever happen. Like the realms of science fiction. I don't really worry about those kind of things. I mean, I might get hung up on stuff like if it's another World War II scenario, how the heck did the Germans beat the Russians? Like, I'm sorry, but the USSR would not topple easily, and the fact that in a lot of these scenarios, it just shows the Germans are steamrolling them without any regard to the materials they had or didn't have. But that's neither here or there. What I'm basically trying to say is I'm not really one who gets hung up on the details like that. And I might even be interested in things that some alternate historians might not even consider alternate history. Because the way that I described that definition, any form of media can be described as alternate history. I mean, Watchmen, for example, that's something that I've often found contested. Because in Watchmen, it's basically a world where superheroes existed and have kind of turned the balance of power in the world, especially the creation of the character Dr. Manhattan, who is like the Superman of this universe. The superheroes have basically turned the entire universe and the entire history on its head. Nixon, I believe, is running 3 terms in a row. The Soviet Union is still around and is still very much at large with the United States, and they are on the brink of war. Much more so than anything that we had in our timeline. But the thing is that the introduction of superheroes, especially Dr. Manhattan, kind of places this more in a science fiction kind of way. Like another alternate history scenario here is because of superheroes, the United States definitively won the Vietnam War. But once again, this is kind of, does this count as alternate history, or is this just science fiction? The way that I would honestly see it is, yes, it is a fictional setting that could never happen in the real world, but there are alternate history elements in it that place it in definitely an alternate timeline. Kind of fits it solely into the alternate history subject or genre, whatever you would call it. So with that being said, I'll just get into some of my favorites. These are the pieces of work that I have found during the past several years and accumulated. I want to say the first thing that stands out as what some people might not consider alternate history, but personally I just love the scenario, is it's a series of books called Anno Dracula. Basically, it takes place in a universe where the heroes of Dracula failed to kill him. The vampire ends up manages to not only kill Jonathan Harker and Quincy, but Quincy Morris, but also is able to run off with Mina, turns her into a vampire, and basically spreads vampirism throughout the entire UK. Eventually, Dr. Van Helsing himself, or Professor Van Helsing, I'm pretty sure he has a doctorate, anyway. Van Helsing gets killed, executed, very much, Dracula style. And the whole series is based around this new universe where vampirism is not only commonplace, but is actually considered the height of aristocracy. You got people who are, who kind of jump between, do I want to live forever but at the cost of never having children and having several limitations like not being able to come out at, during the day. But then you also get the, the problematic ones, like the fact that it's described that Dracula's bloodline is actually, what's the word they used? It's basically dirty. Like, people who are descended from Dracula, at least in later generations, are described as basically being, like, the, God, I'm sorry, I can't come up with words right now. They're essentially the misfits. They can't. If they try to transform into an animal or something, they'll usually get halfway and then they'll die. They're basically just these, mutated degenerates that other vampire societies actually look down upon in later books. And honestly, I find that kind of ironic, given that Dracula is the one who sparked this vampire era in the UK. But again, that's what I just absolutely love. And eventually the books even get into World War I, and something they do also is they bring in both historical figures, but also literary characters, like Sherlock Holmes is mentioned. Let's see. Okay, I'll say this. If you want to see all the people that are even in this book, like Dr. Jekyll is in this book. I think Frederick Aberline, the detective or the inspector tasked with finding Jack the Ripper, he is in the book. There are so many of those penny dreadful characters that are found in these books, even if it's just in mention. The fact that it's all basically considered the shared universe, to the point where it's basically, it could easily be considered an alternate timeline to that show Penny Dreadful. Because that's how many characters from literature are in this. I mean, I think they would even, like, it's on par with The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen when those books got so freaking packed with characters from that era. It was essentially like almost a comedy. But anyway, so it's such a great book. I'm not gonna really spoil a whole lot, but you could tell that the author Kim Newman, he was just having so much fun with this, and because he was having fun, we're having fun. Another one, this one is really popular, is Red Dawn, the original, not the North Korean invading remake they did with Chris Hemsworth and Josh Peck. Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen was one of those movies that came out, funny enough, around the time that the Soviet Union was even still kicking around. It basically showed a scenario where the Soviet Union kicks off several communist revolutions in South America and starts this huge, like, 2-3 front war with the United States. It's described that they destroyed Washington, D.C. and several other cities with nuclear bombs, and ironically, it's described then after this that both nations kind of decided not to use nuclear weapons, stating that they didn't want to blow each other up. Which, for anyone who's lived during the Cold War, they're getting a kick out of that, because there is no way the Ruskies would ever allow a world where America would go unscathed after bombing the heck out of them. But anyway, so Red Dawn shows Russians invading this small town, and a group of teenagers band together, get all the guns and all the food and all the camping supplies they need. They go out into the forest, and they basically become a guerrilla resistance force. Obviously, this is where the very popular Wolverines shout comes from, because that's, the name of their group. The Wolverines are going around fighting Russians and showing America, hey, look, even the common citizen can repel invaders. You need you not movies that, once again, if you start looking at the scenario and you try to apply even the slightest amount of realism in it, it's not very accurate at all. Like, no, there's no way. There is no way Red Dawn would work without everybody being slightly irradiated. And by slightly, I mean the flesh is boiling and the cells are screaming. But it's still good, campy fun. Like, you could just shut your brain off and just smile and go through it. It's just, I actually really love it. The remake, not so much. Let's see. Oh, another one. This one is actually more recent. Is Inglourious Bastards. This is another World War II alternate scenario. Although this one is a little different because it honestly kind of sucker punches you a little bit with its little divergence. Basically, for those who don't know, and I mean by now I'm pretty sure everybody basically knows this movie and its twist, but just in case. An American-led special force team is dropped into Nazi-occupied France called the Bastards. And what these guys do is they basically just, like what Aldo Rain says, we do one thing and one thing only, killing Nazis. And that's what they do. They go around, they free people who could be allies to their cause, they become a ruckus to the Nazis, and ultimately it all accumulates with the successful assassination of the Führer himself. And that scene just took me so off guard and just made me smile ear to ear. Everyone knows that Quentin Tarantino isn't one who gets trapped in the details of of history, or even better yet, he's not the kind of guy who will not. He's not the kind of guy who will, not be bombastic. Subtlety is not always a strong suit. But I actually thought it was really surprising that it just kind of pulled that out of nowhere, of just them blasting the freaking, what's that called? The toothbrush mustache off his face. That was such a great scene. I loved it. But because of that basically cemented itself as one of my favorite alternate history movies. Let's see. And then we get, I would say this is by far one of the most popular alternate history video game franchises of all time, Fallout. Fallout is another alternate history scenario with a very unique divergence, and that's what I think makes it stand out the most. It's not, what if the Axis powers won World War II? It's not, it's unexpected. Basically, the Fallout universe introduces a divergence where atomic power becomes the dominant force in the United States, where instead of creating compact computers and trying to streamline things, the technology of the 1950s only gets better, but on a different course. Atomic-powered cars, robots become a thing. The computers, though, if anyone's played the game, you'll notice that obviously there are no such thing as laptops in this world. In fact, computer mainframes are still the size of a room. Nothing is simplified, nothing is made smaller. Basically, it's just the technology of the 1950s, the comics and the books that came out around that time of how the future could have gone. In this universe, that's how history goes. Of course, though, that also means that the 1950s is, Red Scare still is a thing, to where instead of the Russians, it's now the Chinese, and it accumulates into basically, obviously, as the Fallout series shows, a grand apocalypse where both nations basically just nuked each other out of existence. But that's basically why Fallout is so well remembered, is that it's not just a post-apocalyptic universe that's well fleshed out, and to the point where there's even something called a Fallout Bible, which, although at this point many fans still consider non-canon, it's still something that gets looked at as, like, almost like not quite gospel, but close enough, and I'm ashamed to admit, but I did play the first Fallout games long ago, the first two. But I was really too young to really understand what was going on. It was just more of a weird top-down RPG taking place in a desert. Again, I was little when that game came out, so I didn't really put much, stock into it. Fallout 3 was my very first PS3 game, so obviously that was something that I was like, oh boy, yeah, sign me up, But moving on from there, we then have a more recent video game alternate history, Wolfenstein: The New Order / The New Colossus / The Old Blood / The New Blood. Wolfenstein has always never really, cemented itself, fully in history. It's always been like World War II, but different. What if the Germans were, using spirit magic in order to turn the tide against the Allies? It's almost reminiscent of Hellboy, where the Nazis were using magic and occult powers in order to try and win the war. But Wolfenstein takes an even deeper plunge by introducing alien technology, basically that, alien technology, and shows that in this scenario, the Germans managed to basically weaponize it. They create complex robots, they create powerful weapons that are several decades ahead of where everyone else is in the world, and ultimately the Germans win World War II. Not really described what happens in Japan or Italy or whatever. You can imagine that most likely they probably were destroyed because the Reich is so unbelievably powerful in this universe that it's a miracle that the resistance that B.J. Blazkowicz even manages to, win. But that's the scenario there, though, is basically the Germans get their hands on advanced technology and win the war. Except it goes a little step further. This universe decides to really delve into what a world under their rule would have been like, and obviously it's not good. One of my favorite little things about it is one of the little details. Not a lot of people, I'm pretty sure not many people would see this, but I did. It is described in the New Colossus that the Germans are literally trying to erase every other language. Every American citizen is literally told that they need to learn German by a certain day, or literally if they catch you speaking English, you're going to be imprisoned and re-educated. I find that detail just so it's so totalitarian, it's so perfect. That's one of those little things I don't think I've ever seen in any other pieces of alternate history. The subtlety that they're even trying to erase languages to assert themselves as a dominant force in the world. But it's one of those, obviously, it's not a subtle franchise. They're not going to get hampered down with, well, how did they get this technology? It's aliens, basically. That's basically every argument solved. It's just Wolfenstein saying aliens, and boom, over. And that's honestly why I really like about it. Wolfenstein was never a game series I thought took itself overly serious, and this new franchise that they just made, obviously they went just full on with it. There was no hesitation. And this is another one of those, not many, it's more of a, an alternate universe than an alternate history, but personally I just wanted to add it to this list because I really, really, really want to talk about it. Because DC does Elseworlds, where for somehow if there are those fans out there who somehow don't know about them, where things go differently than the normal timeline. Some really popular ones are Batman, Gotham by Gaslight, Superman, Red Sun. But the one I'm talking about is one that is also, again, relatively recent. But just the whole subject, the whole premise is just beautiful. Essentially, I'm talking about the Injustice universe. Somehow, if there are people out there who don't know what this is about, essentially, the Joker tricks Superman into killing Lois Lane and their unborn child. And this causes Superman to essentially crack because it also just, in the Joker and all his little jokerness, also tied an atomic bomb to Lois's heartbeat. So the moment Superman killed her, Metropolis blows up. So left with nothing, Superman literally flies into the jail where the Joker is being held and shoves his fist through his chest, essentially showing that Superman is done being Superman. He is now just pure evil. Well, okay, maybe not pure evil, not yet. But he is done with sparing villains. He now sees that what Batman does, sparing the villains and just imprisoning them, hoping they'll get better, or at the very least, not wanting to kill because he sees that as, if he kills someone, he's no better than they are. Superman just throws that all out the window. To him, Batman has been letting them get away with this all along. If anything, he also blames Batman for the Joker still being alive. So, Superman essentially ends world conflict by establishing his own regime, literally just called the Regime. And the whole premise of what if Superman became evil and took over the world is something that I am shocked not enough people have really explored. Personally, I'm just a little disclaimer here, I do not like Superman as a character. I'm not going to go into that because that would probably take up, at least another, that would take up an hour of recording, and I don't want to get into that rant. So anyway, I don't like Superman. I never did. Never have, and never will. Except for this scenario. Because it shows how screwed the world would be if Superman decided to throw all of his moral, boy scouty everything and just went, whatever, you know what? I'm done. It wouldn't end well, and it doesn't end well. Eventually, Superman becomes so crazed with power and so desperate to make his, footprint in the world, as if he hasn't done that already, that he's even willing to kill and cripple his allies if they step out of line. Basically, he goes full dictator. And all the while, Batman and his resistance are, what are they called? They're called the Insurgency, are doing everything in their power to try and stop Superman, including using... Okay, this is one element I'll never not laugh at. Including using kryptonite DNA-infused pills that gives them the kind of strength and durability of a Kryptonian. So that way they can actually turn the tide against Superman. And also explains why Batman doesn't just get his face pounded in as soon as Superman is in the room. But that's what I mean, though. That's why I love alternate history, is that it allows you to look at things that have happened, at characters, at settings, at storylines, and just basically say, what if blank happened? And all these franchises I just mentioned all perfectly personify that. Now, what that has to do with D&D, simple enough, there's a lot of D&D stuff that is centered, or at least tabletop RPGs that are centered around alternate history scenarios. There's quite a few superhero versions, so basically a lot of Watchmen-inspired pieces of work. But also you get Crimson Skies, where basically the United States crumbles during the Great Depression, the railroads are destroyed, and airships and planes become the main form of transportation. Like, that's a really, really popular one. I mean, I think they made a couple of games based off of it. And there's, I think it's called GURPS, or GURPS, which is a franchise that deals in multiverse and people exploring different universes and timelines. And obviously, there are ones that are heavily inspired by alternate history, such as, I believe there's one where the Roman Empire never fell, one where obviously the Axis powers won World War II, one where the Confederacy won the Civil War, blah, 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 blah. But that's what I mean, though, is this subject, this genre, is so huge that even RPGs are taking inspiration from it. And I think, honestly, that alternate history could be a great way for a GM or a DM, whichever, to really kind of turn things around on their players. For example, imagine, if you will, you have a game that's been going on for a decade, maybe even longer. You know, the universe is well established, the players have gone through several events of history and know basically the entire timeline by heart. Well, what if, like, for a one-shot, you decided to go back into that history, have everyone pick up the characters as they were back then, or possibly even new characters, or maybe the same characters, but, you know, maybe they go back in time, or they get sent through this, you know, a portal to an, you know, parallel universe, where basically, you know, what if they didn't kill that lich, and that lich managed to completely corrupt this surrounding region, turning it into an undead, you know, hellscape, and now they need to basically see the ramifications of what would have happened if they had failed. Or, you know, okay, here's a good example. What if even Critical Role did a one-shot where the Chroma Conclave was never defeated? What if it shows what would have happened if the Briarwoods had managed to defeat the heroes, and or even managed to kill Percy, or even worse, managed to make him, you know, a thrall or something? How would Vox Machina be able to, you know, stop that? Or even better, they would have to play new characters, because what if Vox Machina was destroyed in these scenarios? There's so much you could do with alternate history, and it's in every single scenario you throw at, you know, your players will always be a surprise. Because you, especially if you don't even set it up as, you know, you don't even tell them what's going to happen ahead of time. It's just you sit down, you tell them, okay, you're going to make your character sheets like this. They go, oh, okay, sure. And then you go, here's the scenario. And just watch their eyes widen and their jaws drop as they watch you literally rewrite history in front of them. I've done this once, not with a pre-established universe, not yet. That's something I'm definitely looking towards. But one of my very first games I've ever ran as a GM was a Star Wars RPG, where I decided I wanted to go into this differently, because I know one of the first things people might think about is, what if the Confederacy won the Clone Wars, or what if the Empire won the Galactic Civil War? That was something a lot of my players thought was going to happen when after the first session. That is exactly what I wanted to avoid, though. I didn't want to be predictable. I called the campaign Broken Honor, and it was based in a universe where the Mandalorian Empire was not destroyed. The Mandalorian Wars never occurred. And because the Mandalorian Wars never occurred, the Jedi Civil War never happened, meaning the Jedi aren't divided and aren't so small as they were. Essentially, the code of the Knights of the Old Republic still remains, and the Jedi are actually so many now that they even occupy entire worlds. With, I believe I made Korriban their main temple world. That's what I called them, temple worlds. All, you know, semblance of the Sith are stomped out almost immediately. So even Palpatine has to play his cards, much more delicately, because there is a chance that if he gets, spotted, he's not going to come back, because these Jedi are extremely powerful. But here's the things that makes this scenario so great, is that because there's no Jedi Civil War, I realized there were more consequences from that alone than the Mandalorian Empire not falling. For example, Count Dooku never turns to the dark side in this scenario. That's directly because there was no Civil War. He ends up training Qui-Gon Jinn and is actually good friends with him, who then trains Obi-Wan Kenobi and eventually Anakin Skywalker. The whole point of the adventure, though, was the universe had the Republic in desperate need of an ally, because the Jedi had recently established their independence, but they had still managed to keep ties with the Republic. But they could make their own decisions. They weren't directly tied to the wills of the Chancellor, like they might have been in the normal timeline. Like, for example, if the Republic wanted them to dedicate certain material to the war effort, the Jedi could say no, if they felt that was a deterrent to them. They basically believed themselves to be the guardians. Sorry for this. They believed themselves to be the guardians of the galaxy, where, in the literal technical term, they were meant to oversee the peace and prosperity of the Republic and the surrounding systems, but also the Confederacy. So when the Separatists get together and try launching their campaign for independence, the Jedi are more taking a more passive stance on it. They're not getting directly involved. Then the Republic turns to the only force in the universe that hasn't been tapped yet, the Mandalorian Empire, that has been isolated for centuries. And when they do go to them for a potential military alliance against the Confederacy, they find the Mandalorian fleet 10 times larger than the Republic's fleet, their weapons much more advanced, even their droids are significantly more powerful than even the battle droids that the Republic made, or not the Confederacy made. So this is great because now the Republic has a powerful ally, but then there's also the talks going around of, well, why do the Mandalorians have this kind of power? Why do they have these weapons? It's almost like they were planning something before they were, brought into the war. And that's actually where my adventure starts, is they are asked by Jedi Master Dooku to investigate any possible plans the Mandalorians might have. So they become spies for the Jedi within the Mandalorian Empire. And not surprisingly, the big reveal was the Mandalorians were planning a full-scale invasion of the entire galaxy. And this is where I started having a lot of fun with the alternate history scenario, because then it's found out that one of the keys to this is that they managed to capture a Geonosian engineer, and they discovered something known as the ultimate weapon, and the Mandalorians very much wanted it. The players then told Dooku of this, so now the Jedi are being mobilized, and funny enough, because of the Jedi's independence, they actually don't inform the Republic, because in their eyes, the Republic may also want to use the ultimate weapon, and they don't even know what it is. They just know that it is a war ender, and they want to make sure no one gets their hands on it. The Jedi actually want to destroy the plans. So I gave the players a choice at the end of the game, because they got the disc. They just needed to show, either give it to the Mandalorians or give it to the Jedi. They surprisingly decided to reveal themselves as spies for the Jedi and handed the plans over to the Mandalorians, therefore completely changing the whole face of the war. Because now the Mandalorians have their hands on this powerful weapon. The Jedi are aware they have it, and so the Jedi want to mobilize against the Mandalorians, but they also don't want the Republic to catch wind of this. So there's a lot of, after that point, there was a lot of, back alley brawls. There was a lot of, subterfuge and espionage, and it's such a great scenario, and all I did was ask a single question. What if the Mandalorian Empire never fell? And just everything just came tumbling out after that. And that's why alternate history can just be so freaking amazing when used within the D&D or just tabletop role-playing setting. Is that every time you make a scenario around it, if you put the time, the effort, the energy, everything into your scenario, your players will always be happy. Your players will always be surprised. But again, you really need to put in that effort. Making Broken Honor, I think I dedicated entire days to just researching, scouring Wikipedia and just doing research. Obviously stuff that now Disney has declared non-canon, but, well, at that time it wasn't. But that's just what I'm talking about, though. That's why I wanted to talk about alternate history. It's one of those genres that I feel like, although it is expressed through tabletop gaming, I feel like not a lot of people know about it, and I think that it'd be a really good way for you to, turn the tide or, twist the expectations of your players, even if it's just something as far as a one-shot, a non-canonical romp, through a what-if scenario. Sorry, this is just an episode I've been always really excited to do. And if there are people out there who are actually really, really interested now in exploring this genre, I actually have a few YouTube channels that I follow that I would heavily encourage you to find. I mean, you can just basically type in a scenario, like, for example, what if Isildur threw the One Ring into Mount Doom? Or, what if, for example, what if Robb Stark wasn't killed in Game of Thrones? You could just type that in, you'll find videos showing that scenario. But here's a few people that I personally follow. First, the good people over at Talkernet History. It is a podcast where two guys, Matt and Max, sit down and talk about alternate history scenarios and history in general. Basically, they'll take a topic and say, well, let's explore it. Like stuff even, what if, they'll explore, if Germany could have defeated Russia in Operation Barbarossa. They explore what if Pearl Harbor never happened, or what if other options were explored before Pearl Harbor. These guys just get really into it, and I can just listen to them for hours. They are so in depth, and they are so knowledgeable about World War II that these scenarios are not only realistic, but they're also really entertaining to listen to. And sometimes they'll even go so far as taking a book and just saying, alternate generals, alternate presidents, or whatever, and just saying, okay, well, let's talk about this book. And basically, an observation / review. And once again, highly recommend them. Then there's the, by far, most likely the most popular alternate history channel of all time, Alternate History Hub. Its host, Cody, has not only published a book, I believe it was called the Altrapa Archive. I am so sorry if I got this wrong. The Altrapa Articles. And it is, Altrapa is Atlantrapa. I'm so sorry, I'm butchering this name, but I haven't actually read the book, but it explores a really interesting scenario that, although implausible, which Cody has personally admitted, really opens up a lot of storytelling possibilities. And I think that's basically alternate history in a nutshell. Implausible, but fun, Alternate History Hub, he's also done a whole lot of other scenarios. I mean, he's gone into deep observations, including exploring the universes of Fallout, the universe of World War Z, the universe of Kaiserreich, Cody has really gone just full blown everything into his scenarios, and it's really fun to watch. Then there is Monsieur Z. He does a lot of you'll find him. He's the alternate history channel who does flags a lot as thumbnails, and his scenarios they can range from being really funny, like what if Australia won the Emu War, to ones that are actually pretty fascinating, like what if Ireland became a fascist state during World War II? What if America became a fascist? There's a lot of what if blank country became a fascist state, but that's neither here or there. I'm just saying that this guy really enjoys his stuff, and I would say he's up there with Alternate History Hub in terms of the depth of his scenarios. And for more of a, if anyone's more interested in like what I was just describing with my Star Wars Broken Honor campaign, Generation Tech does a lot of what if Star Wars scenarios, and he gets really into them too. He's really knowledgeable on the franchise, and so that he's gonna scour every nook and cranny of the lore to make sure everything works well. For example, he did one of what if the clones had rebelled against the Republic, or at least against the Chancellor during during the Clone Wars. What if Order 66 didn't work? He just gets really into these, and all of his scenarios are just fascinating. And that's basically all I really need to say. Those channels, definitely look into them if you're interested in alternate history, because if you are interested in the genre, you won't find anyone better, I guarantee. Anyways, so I've been Master Mimic, and thank you so much for listening. I know that my uploads have been kind of frantic lately, but that's kind of where I'm going to be happening. What's going to be happening? God, I can't talk. That's basically what I'm going to have to do from now on. My work schedule is fairly erratic right now, thank you, COVID. But that's just, those are the cards I've been dealt. But I will make sure to always prioritize you guys. And, well, as long as my wife and I don't have plans, I'm afraid to say. Marriage comes first. But I will always make sure to give you guys the proper attention that you deserve, because you guys have all been so supportive of my channel. It's this little fledgling thing, but the fact that there are people listening, the fact that there are people watching, you guys give me a reason to do this. Again, just thank you all so much for your support. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Have a good one.